Welcome in, everybody. So normally I would say welcome into Talking Huskers. I know you see the background, but this is kind of a joint, I guess, preview, as you could say. Our Indiana Voice of College Football channel just recently got started up. Jeffrey's here from Only Talk Sports to break down Indiana. He's also the one that's heading up the Indiana Voice of College Football. So Jeffrey, do you want to go ahead and kind of introduce yourself to my audience and kind of tell the people where they can find you?
Thanks. I appreciate it, Justin. Definitely excited to do this crossover episode. It was just perfect. Like both of our shows, 7 o'clock on Tuesday night. I mean, you couldn't set that up any better. Yep. And definitely awesome. And it's a big game as well. Going to be very exciting. But absolutely, like Justin said, Indiana at the Voice of College Football. Brand new channel, a part of the Voice of College Football lineup. I mean, I just put the link in the chat. If you guys would like to go check it out and subscribe, would really appreciate it. But definitely going to be exciting to talk more Indiana football as the season goes along. And it's really nice to see Indiana doing actually good in football. It's not a common thing. And it's also really nice to see Nebraska football, the storied program that they are, have success again. I've always liked Nebraska too. I like Indiana. They're my favorite team in the Big Ten, but Nebraska is definitely one of those teams I do like more so than others in the Big Ten. The storied history they have, Tom Osborne. So it's nice to see them win it again. And it's going to be a big game on Saturday. Can't wait.
Absolutely. And Indiana's kind of similar. I think they're just kind of the fun story of the offseason. So easy team to root for. But now we reach the point of the season where we kind of start breaking down the pros and cons of the opposing team, and we get a little bit more nitpicky and maybe start pointing out some negatives. Some Indiana fans did not like a video, a clip of my live stream that was about 5 minutes of my preview, but it was asking the question about physicality on the Indiana side, which I'll get into in just a second. First thing that I want to dive into, though, what are your overall thoughts on the season so far for Indiana and how it's transpired? And I know the positiveness of it, but just in general, game by game, what are some of the things that you think stand out to you positively and negatively about this season so far?
I mean, it's a great question because, for a lot of teams, being 6-0, it wouldn't really be a big deal. Like, especially if your schedule is as easy as Indiana's has been to start the year. The issue is, though, when trying to find a lot of negatives for Indiana, is the fact that they're 6-0 for the first time since 1967. We're not crazy. Talking about a program that, like 9 out of the last, 10 seasons, they start out 5-0, 6-0, whatever. I mean, it is just incredible what's going on in Indiana, especially considering the last 3 years of poor play that they've had. I know the 2019-2020 seasons, like people say, well, Indiana's been good recently. They can, it's possible, but still Indiana football historically is just awful. The losing is power before team in college football history. So
it's like Nebraska basketball.
So absolutely. It's kind of funny how Indiana basketball and Nebraska football are similar, and Nebraska basketball and Indiana football are similar. That's wild.
It's like that Spider-Man meme where we're just both pointing at each other. But
absolutely. But I do think that, to look at just, maybe I guess you would say some of the negatives, because obviously like the positives of the fact that Indiana's winning when they never have at this rate. Is like, you could say their defense at times, like you said, the physicality. I agree. Like the defensive line, it's not an elite defensive line. They have one guy who's going to probably be an NFL player, Mikael Kamara. He's good. He has like 5 sacks on the season, but everybody else is just okay. They're not great on run defense. I mean, they're not horrible, but they really haven't played anybody that's really pressured them in that regard either. Even though Nebraska's not the best running offense in the world either, but still, maybe Nebraska will be able to expose that more so than some of the other teams that they've played. I mean, it's just tough to find a lot of negatives, though. I mean, they've blown out everybody that they've played, basically. I mean, they're breaking records left and right. I mean, it was becoming like a meme online that every week Indiana was breaking some record. So they're just doing so well overall. I mean, definitely the UCLA game was glorious. The fact Indiana got their first ever win in the Rose Bowl, that was awesome to see. I know UCLA is not very good, but actually Indiana has beaten UCLA by more points than any of the other teams that have played them. Penn State didn't even beat them by as much. LSU didn't beat them by as much. So I don't believe in the transitive property on that of how a team plays compared to others, but that is a good sign. Just overall, like Indiana, when they've had some struggles, like Rourke threw 2 interceptions against Maryland, the only 2 picks that he's had all season. He bounced back from it, still threw for over 300 yards, 3 touchdowns. So every time Indiana, makes a mistake or 2, they bounce back, turn it around, and their defense was not great against Northwestern, but their offense was fantastic. So just seeing week by week, couple mistakes, couple areas they need to get better at, but then they just find ways to keep improving, and that's why they're 6-0, despite an easy schedule, but still impressive for Indiana.
Yeah, and I think that was my biggest thing that got me the kind of concerns or questions about the physicality too. Mm-hmm. Not only that, but there is, because of the JMU transfers, of course, and so them being new to the Big Ten, and they've shown their ability to be physical against Maryland and Northwestern. But, kind of watching that Northwestern game, Northwestern kind of went blow for blow with them up until the end, and then they kind of ran out of gas. Do you think that was just kind of an aberration or an outlier on your defense between them and Maryland? Do you think there was just some mistakes that can easily be cleaned up, or is that, kind of something that you think can be an issue against Nebraska? Do you think that defense is leaky to an extent, or do you think they'll lock it down?
I mean, it's kind of tough because obviously, I'm sure you probably do the same thing. But when you like a team and you're watching a game, you I wouldn't say make excuses, but when you watch stuff, like sometimes your bias kind of leans over. I really try not to have bias in that regard. I don't. Because some people are really bad, like they let their blinders affect their thinking big time. But
for sure,
that Maryland game, honestly, because I know most people besides Indiana fans and Maryland fans did not watch that game. There are a lot of other better games on, but Indiana should have won that game by a lot more than they did. There was one play literally, and it did show up on Twitter, but the defensive back for Indiana, D'Angelo Pons, who's one of the best defenders on the team, he got blocked accidentally by the referee, and he would have made a sure-handed tackle in the backfield, and it ended up being a 75-yard run for a touchdown for Maryland. So that was probably the worst mistake Indiana's had all season long on a massive explosive play. Like, they have not given up explosive plays. A lot of it's been like short, like 10, 15, 5-yard completions and runs. Like, they haven't been like getting blown out over the top. But that run by Roman Hemby, 75-yard touchdown run, that looked bad on paper, like, man, Indiana gave up a big run like that. It was because the referee blocked D'Angelo Pons. And then there was another play in that game where I don't even know how this counted, but it was like 3rd 17. Maryland throws a pass, and the guy was like halfway out of bounds. He fell on his backside, and he was literally like half of himself was out of bounds, but they said that half of his body counted being inbounds. I don't know how that is, but they counted it. Even the commentators were like, that shouldn't have counted. And then Maryland scored a touchdown off like 3 guys tipping it up in the air, including an Indiana player, and then somehow it was caught. So, like, Indiana could have easily won like 49-14, but the game was a lot closer because of those 2 plays.
And what you're talking about, the officiating, I feel like officiating has just been, I don't know about you, but I feel like it's been horrible in college football this year, like terrible. It's just missed calls, more than I've ever seen. I don't know if any of it has to do with betting, but it's weird how much it's ramping up and getting worse. But with that being said, what are some of the things, when we talk about strength on strength, it's Nebraska's defense versus this Indiana offense. And I think Fongway's got a good point here. If the D sits back, plays that loose zone type stuff, the QB is going to pick them apart because Curtis Rourke loves to target that middle of the field. And the thing is, if you give them cushion, like, he's got the touch and he's got the ability to put the ball right where it needs to be. And that's what he's done so far this season. What are some of the things, because, looking at his numbers too, he throws, really well under pressure, just like he does with a clean pocket. But going against Nebraska's D-line and the defense that, allows, under 13 points per game, a rush defense has given up, no rushing touchdowns. What are some problems that you think our defense presents for Indiana's offense?
It's a great question. I mean, the thing with Indiana in the last 4 to 5 years, which is why Tom Allen ultimately ended up getting fired, was the fact that their offensive line was terrible, and Tom Allen would not fire the offensive line coach because he never fired anybody because, you know, he was friends with everybody that was the coaches. That's fair. But the O-line was terrible. Indiana's offensive line is not bad this year. I wouldn't say it's like top 3 or 4 in the Big Ten, but they got a couple guys that might be draft picks. I mean, saying that for Indiana is unreal. Like, that don't happen, but very often. But the offensive line's a lot better. Indiana's running the ball very well. They got multiple running backs with tons of touchdowns. Their top 2 guys have like 5 rushing touchdowns, 4 rushing touchdowns, ranking very well in the Big Ten. And the reason, like you said, that Rourke has been able to have the season that he's had is because, yeah, he's making the throws, but he's had time to get rid of the ball.
Yeah.
So really, to be honest, Nebraska's probably by far the best defense that Indiana's going to face. I would have thought maybe it would have been Northwestern, but Northwestern's defense kind of was awful against Indiana. So I don't know if it's the case that Northwestern really hasn't played anybody that could expose their defense until Indiana. So definitely, I do think Nebraska, it's going to be interesting because they have the most talent of any team Indiana's played on defense. If they can get to Rourke and he is under pressure, he could make a lot of mistakes because he really hasn't been pressured to this point all that much. Because really, even the 2 interceptions he had against Maryland, it was actually wide receivers basically running the route wrong both times. You don't ever, like, Rourke didn't blame those guys. Signetti didn't blame those guys. Like, you don't do that. You own up to the mistakes and you go back out there and play good. That's how, you know, you don't want to do that. But it wasn't really Rourke's fault. He's been basically perfect. But, I mean, those 2 picks weren't even really his fault. So 14 touchdowns, basically no errors. He's played fantastic, but he really hasn't been pressured to this point. So Indiana's offensive line is a lot better. But, again, they haven't really been pressured. So if Nebraska can get pressure on Rourke and Indiana's O-line and not allow them to run the ball, because that's something else Indiana's been able to do. They've been able to run the ball so much.
That was my next question. So we can lead into that. Like, what, you know, we talk about the Indiana pass game. Give me some insight into the Indiana run game.
I mean, the thing I like about the run game is that a lot of teams have one guy. They have a main dominant back, and if he's not, you know, like 100% healthy, you don't have any other options. Or, you know, if he's running out of gas, or just a type of back that he is. I mean, like back in the day, like when you had Alabama with like an Eddie Lacy, who was just a Mack truck, but then they had Jay Yeldon, who was the speedster. You had those 2 different options. Now, obviously, Indiana doesn't have either of guys that good, but they have different guys at running back. Really, they have a 3-headed monster because Justice Ellison is really good. I mean, he's kind of a do-it-all back. He's got some power, but he's got speed as well. And then you got Tyson Lawton. He's the big guy. He's the big power back that just bruises for 3 or 4 yards like every single play. And then you got Kalen Black, who's kind of a little bit of both as well, has more of the power of Lawton, but still some speed like Ellison. And then Elijah Green, who they don't even play that much, he's the speedster. Like, honestly, I don't know why he doesn't play more because he's fast. When he gets out in the open field, he's really good, but they don't play him that much because I guess, you know, the other guys they trust more or whatever. But still, like, Indiana has diversity at running back in their guys that they can use. Like, during the Stevie Scott era, it was just Stevie Scott. Like, that was it. Like, you had Peyton Ramsey, Michael Penix, and then it was Stevie Scott, and nobody really behind him that was able to really contribute all that much. Now they have multiple different guys that can, you know, scare a defense, not super heavily, but good enough. And I really think the offensive line being better has contributed to their success. Because if it was the offensive line under Tom Allen the last couple of years, these guys wouldn't be doing anything. Even though I do think that they're upgrades at running back, because every single running back Indiana has, they're all transfers. They're all new. None of these guys were on last year's team. So the offensive line's contributing to it, but the running backs, I like their different styles of play that can confuse a defense.
For sure. And shout out Jackson. I just want to say shout out to you. Thank you so much for the $5, man. It's greatly appreciated. I appreciate everybody who even stops in, likes the stream, comments, super chats, man. I appreciate it. So thank you so much, Jackson. We really appreciate that. So now let's go a little bit into, I'm going to just kind of ask a general question here about who, in your opinion, is, you know, it could be multiple players, but who, in your opinion, is the key for Indiana to win this game? Maybe like an under the radar. We know Curtis Rourke, but who are some other guys who you think are going to need to step up for Indiana to win this game?
It's a great question. You're talking about both offense and defense, correct?
Yes. Yep.
Okay. Absolutely. So, I mean, he's not an underrated guy, but Elijah Surratt has been incredible for Indiana. And I'm really surprised that he's not further up on draft boards. I don't know if it's because it's Indiana. Like, I feel like there's an Indiana effect where you're playing at Indiana, so you're not going to get recognition for the draft. But Elijah Surratt statistically has been one of the best receivers in the Big Ten. He's reliable. He doesn't drop balls. Ironically, Indiana's wide receiver room only has one drop among the whole team this season. One drop in 6 games as the whole unit. I don't even know how it's feasible. So Rourke's been on the money, but the receivers have been uber reliable. So that's another thing with that. But Elijah Surratt, he's just an all-around wide receiver. And the thing is you could say, well, yeah, Nebraska can shut him down, but Indiana's wide receiver room's deep. Keyshawn Williams, he's been emerging lately because Miles Price and Miles Cross are two kind of slot receivers who have been basically the main 2 guys for Indiana. But Keyshawn Williams has been coming around. He's another slot guy. They got like 3 different slot receivers, but Keyshawn Williams, the Wake Forest transfer, has gotten a whole lot more recognition in the last couple of weeks for his play. He had like a 50-yard reception where he caught like a little screen route, and then he was just running all over the place. Just a little guy, kind of like, I wouldn't say Whop Phillier level yet because he hasn't played as much, but he could get there. So he's good as well. Zach Horton at tight end is probably the most underrated player on the entire team because he only has like 90 receiving yards. So he's not getting any recognition because he's not catching a lot of balls, but his blocking is incredible. That's another reason that the run game's been so good. He's a fantastic run blocker. And then on defense, I mentioned Mikel Kamara, but he's going to be a guy everybody's going to pay attention to because he's one of the sack leaders in the Big Ten. But D'Angelo Pons definitely is key because Indiana secondary, I wouldn't say it's leaky, but they can get exposed at times. But Pons is only 5'9", but he's so good. I mean, he doesn't give up receptions hardly ever, even though he's going up against guys that are like 6'3", 6'4". Ty Felton for Maryland, who's been basically the best part of their team. He only had 30
he's their like
yards
only target.
Indiana.
Yeah, he's like their only target. Like he had a crazy amount of their percentage of overall production. Yeah.
He only had 30 receiving yards, though, against Indiana. And, like, in the other games besides that, he's been averaging like 100 receiving yards. So, definitely, D'Angelo Pons is a big reason for that. So, I would say D'Angelo Pons is key. And definitely Jalen Walker and Aiden Fisher at linebacker for Indiana as well because they're probably the 2 best defenders on the team outside of Mikel Kamara, but they don't get as much attention because Mikel Kamara has the statistics to back it up. But those guys have definitely been good in the run defense as well.
Yeah, and David has a good question here that I was going to kind of go into. You know, that crowd, of course, is going to be raucous and probably more of an atmosphere than you've probably seen, you know, maybe in a long time, if not your lifetime. Now, how much of a factor do you think, and I know, because I know it can be a factor, but, you know, when Indiana and that stadium is rocking, like how much of a factor do you think it can be in the game?
It's a great question because honestly, the only time I can remember Indiana's crowd being a key component to the game was that Cincinnati game in 2021. They were coming off the great season in 2020. There were no fans because it was the pandemic year. And in 2021, they came into the season ranked, but Penix was not healthy. And that crowd did impact the game. Like they definitely helped out the team stay in that game. And unfortunately, a very bad targeting call that they put on Micah McFadden ended any chance Indiana had to win in that game. He was doing everything on defense. But that crowd, though, was there in that game, and it was very loud. And I think Cincinnati, like Ritter, was definitely struggling a little bit at first. But then they came back, won the game. But this year, I mean, the crowd's been pretty awful this year. I'm not going to lie. A lot of Indiana fans don't like hearing that. But Kurt Cignetti's basically been like, I wouldn't say begging, but he's been like, come on, guys, like we're winning games here. You know, I'm here to build this team. You got to do your part. Because against Charlotte, Western Illinois, you know, teams like that, there was no crowd. It was weak. And obviously, you know, those are bad teams, but that's what people talk about with Nebraska. They have the best fans on earth because their team's been really bad for a while, and they still show up. They still sell out the crowd no matter who they're playing. It could be FCS team. They still sell it out. So Indiana's not at that point. But now that they're winning, and that Maryland game, it wasn't a sellout, but it was very close. it impacted Maryland. It was pretty
Yeah.
loud. It's the loudest I've ever heard it on TV since that Cincinnati game. Now this game's going to be sold out, so I think it's going to be comparable to that Cincinnati crowd back in 2021, and you can hear it on the TV. I mean, Indiana, when they're good and they have a reason to cheer, they're good. They're just not like Nebraska where they'll cheer whenever, like whoever they're playing. Maybe that will come with time if they keep winning and Signetti stays. But since this is a big game, big noon kickoff, it's a sellout. And I know a lot of Nebraska fans have been trolling on Twitter like, oh, well, it's going to be half of us there, like at the Colorado game. I don't think so. I think it's going to be at least, like Will says right there, 70-30 IU. That's my opinion. I think 70-75% of it will be Indiana fans. It's not going to be like Colorado. I don't see it. Now, if it is, I think that will really be tough, but I don't see it.
There was a built-in incentive for us to take over Colorado Stadium, though, because they were actively trying to keep Nebraska fans from being able to buy tickets. So if you had a address in Nebraska, I don't think you could buy tickets from their website or something like that. And so Nebraska fans were going to get season tickets so they could, and then sold all the rest of them except for the Nebraska game, so that way they could get into the game. So yeah, they bring a little bit more incentive, but yeah, our fans do travel very well. But at the same time, you know, this is a situation where Indiana, as excited as they are, probably aren't selling a ton of tickets like out to other people. So that will be something to really watch too. It's not like, I don't know if we would even be able to tell. They're both Reds, so you know, it'd be hard.
Yeah, because Nebraska fans are saying that too. I love the Twitter debate back and forth about the crowd. Oh, well, we're all going to be red, so you're not going to be able to tell until.
I think that's a legitimate. I mean, that's a legitimate thing, because I was just thinking that. I was just like, well, I'm not going to be able to tell the difference probably just with the TV being quick panning, you know, and stuff like that. Maybe if I was there, but not with the TV. As little as they show the crowd, I'm like, I don't even know if we'll be able to tell. Got to go by the noise probably to be able to tell, but. You know, was there anything in particular that you wanted to ask me in terms of, you know, your questions on Nebraska matching up against Indiana?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, for me, because I do feel a big key to this game is whether Indiana can get pressure on Raiola, because he's a young guy. He is a very, you know, inexperienced player, but he's very talented, and he's only going to get better, I believe, because he already, to me, has been getting better since the beginning of the season. He's been playing better, even though he still has, you know, mistakes, and sometimes he could do better at, you know, reading the defense. But do you think that Raiola will be able to handle, you know, a semi, I wouldn't say like super tough road environment, but a semi-tough road environment against Indiana, and against Indiana's defense that is better than it's been? Like, do you believe that he will be able to handle the pressure?
Yeah, and it's tough to say, you know, how, because you know, our road opponents, you know, Purdue wasn't very good, you know, so we haven't seen that, but I do get, you know, big game situations. One of the things I said going into the Colorado game is I thought that was a great experience for him to be able to play in a big moment that has a lot of meaning to the university and the fans, and it's a pivotal game. Against a team that Nebraska should beat. And I thought that was good for him to get that experience and get that confidence and not go against like an Ohio State and get blown out. So we've seen him operate under the pressure. But then my big concern coming into the season was how, you know, what happens against the physical teams. I thought Illinois and Rutgers, mainly Rutgers initially, and then Illinois started playing really well. But I knew Illinois is a physical team, but I thought Rutgers was going to be, you know, the better team. But just their physicality concerned me in terms of how they match up. You know, styles make fights, kind of like we were talking about before. And I think those two physical games, especially against against Rutgers, because Rutgers actually did put a lot of heat on them, and our offense wasn't moving the ball very well. But that, I did a video on that. That had a lot to do with play sequencing, in my opinion. But there were mistakes, right? And it seemed like, you know, he threw the interception, and it seemed like he tightened up a little bit after that. The interception he was kind of baited. It was his first like real freshman mistake. He was kind of baited in the throw. The linebacker stepped up. He was trying to throw the RPO quick slant, and the linebacker backed up and just kind of lurked him, you know? And so I think he's built for the pressure. I really think this is one of those situations where I want Nebraska to definitely try to be playing with a lead and not trying to play catch up. That way, Nebraska can run their offense and be able to run the ball and set him up. Because last week, when we were in a bunch of third and longs, and the reason we were in third and longs is when, Satterfield is passing laterally. When he's passing to the outsides, or jet sweeps, we didn't get a ton of yards on those. Those weren't working. The drives that we scored on against Rutgers, we balanced it out, ran the ball, passed the ball, and we stayed ahead of the line of scrimmage. Every time we throw it laterally behind the line of scrimmage, it ends up killing our drives. And so I think a lot of it's going to come down to really the play sequencing and getting him into a rhythm. I think once he's in a rhythm, it's just ball, but when you have to think, when you're going to be a half second late. And we saw that because Raiola missed a couple, he had a wheel route that was open, but it's some of those timing routes, right? You have a split second window to hit that route before it closes up. And that led to a couple sacks. So, but the good thing about that is I talked about this after the Illinois game, that the defensive film on Illinois, I wasn't really worried about our defense after that game, because I was like, the real testament of our defense will be how they respond once they go in and watch the film. If we trust the coaches, we should trust them to respond. And I'm keeping that same approach about the offense. It's going to come down to how they respond, and how Dylan responds is going to tell us a lot. Coming off of that game where we only scored 14 points, a lot of question marks around the offense. Does he come out and just kind of sling it around the field and kind of reestablish himself? Because he doesn't seem like a guy who's really rattled by much, or a moment's too big for him. But this is a huge game for both teams, so it'll be interesting, that dynamic, to see how it plays out. But the biggest thing for me was seeing how, when he gets roughed up, when he gets hit, and some big bodies land on him, those Big Ten guys start really hitting him, how, once his body got some wear and tear, how is that going to go? And last week I think it was a combination of execution issues, and those can't happen against Indiana. The offense needs to be. So that's why I think the bye week was important for us, to be able to kind of fine tune some of those execution things and keep everything ahead of the sticks, kind of cut down on some of these dumb penalties that were a couple of drive killers last time, and really, implement our game plan and do what we do well, and stop trying to, I guess, deviate from that, get a little too creative or a little too complex. And then also, I just think we need to target the middle of the field, the intermediate level of the field a little more. We're throwing a lot of deep routes. But if we utilize the middle of the field more, especially even on third and longs, 3rd and 10, we don't always have to throw 15, 20 yards. Even if we check it down underneath and try to let our athletes make some plays, you got to just keep it moving. And I think it's been a little too much of all or nothing so far. And I just think there needs to be consistency from our offense to keep him in a rhythm for sure. So,
absolutely. I will say as well, compared to, your expectations coming into the season, I don't know what your expectations were, but definitely would like to see what your thoughts are on that, because a lot of people, are going to be either too high or too low. A lot of people just, when you love a team, you're going to think that they're going to go undefeated. That's just how it works. But compared to your expectations coming into the season, do you think Nebraska's done better or worse than that?
I would say better, probably. Now, when I cover it, I try to take the bias out, and so
me too.
I had predicted Nebraska would be 5-1, but I just got Illinois and Rutgers flip-flopped. So I thought we would lose to Rutgers. Like I said, Illinois turned out to be better than I expected, and so 5-1, still 5-1 after that. The defense is playing, because some people were asking if the defense was going to be able to play at this high of a level coming into the season. After a year of film and all this other stuff, it has. And I don't think, that Rutgers game should detract from the fact that this offense, compared to what it was last year, if we're looking at big picture and looking at what we had last year, we would have killed for this offense last year, but it's one of those things where we're sitting here and we're nitpicky, right? We're nitpicky about our own team. And so, but there are some flaws, but naturally this is year 2 under Matt Rule. We knew this was going to be kind of a 3-year build. And I feel like he's ahead of schedule in terms of his normal year 2s. So I would say everything's kind of planned out as I anticipated, just a couple of different teams, being better than expected. Indiana's one of them. And then a couple of teams looking a little down the schedule, Wisconsin, don't know what to make of them right now, but UCLA, a couple of those games look a little easier now, but I'd say we're kind of a little bit above or ahead of where I expected us to be for sure.
Absolutely. I mean, I think that for me, I had either 4-2 or 5-1. I honestly can't remember. I think I said 4-2 for like this portion of the schedule because I wasn't sure. Like Nebraska's been really struggling the past few years, but I do trust Matt Rule like that he was eventually going to start turning it around, and it definitely looks like that they are, which is great. I mean, it's good for college football to see Nebraska doing better again because, I mean, they're such an historic program. But, I mean, for me, like, I definitely, when I look at teams, I look at who they've played. I never do that transitive property stuff because you look at, like, Nebraska, okay, they beat Rutgers by 7, but then Wisconsin destroys Rutgers. Oh, Wisconsin's way better. No, that's not how it works. Yeah. But I will say that Nebraska's results are a bit interesting because I do feel like they're a better team. They're capable of being a better team than kind of what they've showed.
Just can't put 4 quarters together.
Absolutely. I feel like they could have beat Rutgers by more. They could have beat Purdue by more. Like, because Purdue's terrible. But look what Purdue did. They just almost came back and beat Illinois. So these teams are interesting. They don't always play the same. Like, I felt like Maryland played better against Indiana than Northwestern by a little bit. But then Northwestern blows out Maryland. Doesn't make any sense.
If you think about it this way, like you look at Rutgers and what, Nebraska did was kind of like slowly kind of, I guess, they had the 14 points in the first half. And I think we got a little too conservative in the second half. Wisconsin just kept, pounding the rock, and they got ahead by so much so early that forced Rutgers into throwing the ball. And that's not what they do well. Yeah, for sure. I have one question for you before I get to anything else you have. I thought about this the other day, and are you worried at all that there is some, Maryland of 2023 in this Indiana team? Because last year it was Maryland, and I think Kirk Cignetti's a better coach. I do think the talent's better. But, Maryland coming out 5-0 in 2023 and then going 2-5 the rest of the way, they had this explosive offense. Do you think what makes you think that this Indiana team is different kind of than that Maryland team going forward?
I do completely agree that Kurt Cignetti is a better coach than Mike Locksley.
Without a doubt.
And that is no slight to Maryland fans if there's any watching, but I just don't think Mike Locksley's a great coach. I still can't believe he was a candidate for the Alabama job. Unreal. Like, he was not a legit candidate. No way. So that's definitely a big difference there. Kurt Cignetti, I mean, it is so early in his power conference coaching career, and he's 63 years old before he got.
He's had 9 wins everywhere he's gone, right? At least 9.
The only non-9-win season he had, he went 6-5 in his first season at Elon,
and then 9 after that.
Yeah, then he won a lot more in the second season, but he was part of Saban's staff, and he's won at a high amount wherever he's been. And all the programs he took over, Indiana University, Pennsylvania, Elon, and James Madison, were all terrible before he got there. Yeah. So that gives you hope that, Indiana is not going to fold down the stretch like Maryland did. I feel, though, that the issue is that, like, yes, Indiana's schedule is backloaded. The beginning of the schedule has been way easier than Indiana's had in forever because of the Big Ten East. The Big Ten East is just insane, like how tough Indiana's schedule's been. I mean, there's been some years, Justin, where Indiana's had like the 3rd or 4th hardest schedule in college football. Yeah. And they would go 5-7. Yep. So, like, if you go against the average, like if Indiana had a bottom half strength of schedule, there's a lot of years where Indiana football is going 7-5, 8-4. Yep. Indiana's never really been truly awful. I don't even think they were truly awful last year. They actually were like 8 points from making a bowl game. They went 3-9, but they were 8 points away from making a bowl game. They lost 3 games by 3 or less. Yep. So, is Indiana, have they ever been truly awful in the last decade? No, I don't think so. They've never been truly awful. Maybe the 2021 season because Penix got hurt, and then it was donezo after that. Yeah. But every other season, they've been competent enough. But it's the schedule. This year, they've had the schedule. It's set up. They got the coach now. Probably the best coach Indiana's ever had so far. But I just believe in Cignetti. I don't really think it's a fluke. I just don't. I mean, he just projects like a winner. I mean, now you've got teams like Florida and Florida State wanting him already, and I'm like, no, don't leave. Like, you
Don't
know,
go to Florida
Indiana needs
State.
to pay him. They got the NIL. Like, come on, like keep him and let's see what he can build here at Indiana. But I just think that, yes, Indiana's schedule's backloaded, so they could lose 3 of these games. They could lose 4. I mean, even if Indiana goes 8-4. Is that bad? No, like at all. I picked them to go 7-5 in the preseason. I thought I was bullish. But, you know, even if they end up going 8-4, that's still good. And that would mean they lose to Michigan, Ohio State, maybe Nebraska, maybe either Washington, Michigan State. It'd still be a good season. But I don't think that would be a collapse like Maryland's was. Maryland's just felt more like, yeah, okay, they are kind of just, you know,
playing above their
means. Tagovailoa and not a whole lot else, couple receivers. But, I mean, it's kind of like Will says here, Indiana's lines of scrimmage are better than Maryland's. I agree, especially O-line. The O-line's better. I mean, Tua's younger brother was running for his life all the time at Maryland. Rourke's not. And Tua's younger brother, Talia, would be running around all over the place against bad teams. So, yes, Indiana, I think, is a better team. Even if they end up going 2-4 in this final 6 stretch, I still think that means Indiana's better than that Maryland team was. But I do agree with you, though, that it is – you can say, the schedule and that they could be comparable to that team, but I do think Indiana's better than that team was.
I definitely think they're more balanced across the board for sure. Now, was there any other questions you had about the matchup or from the Nebraska side?
Well, I mean, a great question, I think, because I can see you answering either way would be, are you more worried about Nebraska's defense against Indiana's offense, or are you more worried about Nebraska's offense against Indiana's defense, like performing well?
I think I'm more worried about Nebraska's offense. Not necessarily because of the matchup against y'all's defense, but just because, like I said, I need to see the response from that Rutgers game with the execution issues. Because in my last video, I went play by play, drive by drive, and broke down each and every drive, each and every play, and it's little things, right? It's little things that add up into a big, thing. Because at the end of the day, when you get a drive, you're working with 3 downs. Okay. And if you come out, you go 3 and out, and you have a couple of execution issues each time you get the ball, you're going to be 3 and out, 3 and out, 3 and out. If you're constantly 3rd and long, like the biggest thing that you look at Rutgers versus Washington. Washington put up over 500 yards. Rutgers had under 300. But what did they do well? They won the battle on 3rd down. What did Nebraska do in the first half against Rutgers? They went 5 for 10 on 3rd down. In the second half, they went 2 of 9. And they scored 14 points in the first half. Purdue, first half, Nebraska scored 0. 200 yards, but scored 0. They were 0 for 6 on 3rd down. That is the difference. It is 3rd down that is killing this team. And it's 1st and 2nd down and what we're doing on those downs that are really, if we come out last, week and we kind of get in a drive together, but then we come out with a jet sweep and then we try to throw like a quick little out pass that neither one of them, we end up losing a yard. And then next play, we have to throw 10, 15 yards down the field, incompletion. So it's just one of those things where it's not necessarily that I'm super concerned about the offense. More so, I just need to see the response before I'm fully confident in it. And I need to see him play 4 quarters. That's another thing. I do need to see him play 4 quarters. But,
absolutely. I think another big thing too is a lot of people will say that what you do on 1st and 2nd down matters. Like to get a couple decent gains on 1st, 2nd down, put yourself in 3rd and short instead of 3rd and long. That's key.
Even 3rd and 6.
But what's even better than that is having a great play on 1st and 2nd down where you don't even need a 3rd down. And see, that's what's been great for Indiana is that they have, and again, I know the schedule and who they've played. I totally understand that. Absolutely. For sure. But Indiana football is like in the top 10 to 15 in college football. I don't know the exact number, but I know they're in the top 10 to 15 in college football on the amount of 3rd downs they've had. They barely had any. So that's a big thing I think Nebraska has to do to Indiana is put them in 3rd down. Can Indiana convert when there's pressure? Because, they've barely ever had 3rd downs. I mean, like, they've just been rolling on offense. Like, they're just getting 1st and 10s. They're just getting chunk plays. So, absolutely.
Do you think that potentially becomes an issue if Indiana needs to kind of slow the game down and kind of work those third downs a little bit, try to get to, 3rd and 1s and try to just, in terms of kind of milking the clock. Do you think they have the ability to dial it back and do that and control the clock if they are in a situation where maybe it's the 4th quarter tight game and they're just trying to get out of there, Do you think that's something they're able to do, is control the clock in that time of possession like that?
It's a great question because, we've seen some teams really struggle with clock management this year, including Alabama. They've been terrible with clock management, absolutely horrible. Like, they're still playing up tempo with the lead late in the game. That makes no sense. You don't do that. The thing with Indiana, though, is even though their offense has been great so far this season, they actually rank toward the bottom in college football in tempo. They're already running a pretty slow offense, so they use the majority of the clock every single time.
Yeah.
They just have success when they run their offense. It isn't super quick, though. So I think they can. I think the key just for Indiana is the fact, if they have the lead and you want to milk the clock, can they run the ball against Nebraska's defense? Because Indiana's been running the ball very well, but they haven't really played anybody with a good run defense until, I guess, Northwestern. But Indiana did run the ball very well on Northwestern. So I'm not super concerned, but I am more concerned against Nebraska than anybody else that they've played. But I would say, yes, I think Indiana can do that. I just think that the way that they've been having success on offense, they haven't had to have third downs because Rourke's been throwing 15-yard passes downfield.
Yeah.
1st and 10, first down. 1st and 10,
doesn't,
first down.
It doesn't mean necessarily they're not capable of it.
Convert third downs if they had to, if they're just running the ball. I think they could.
For sure. I'm getting to some comments here. Purdue brought in the backup QB against Illinois. Yeah, he played against Illinois. What a weird game that was. Can't wait. It's going to be fun. Yeah, it's going to be a blast. I can't wait.
It deserves to have big noon kickoff. Absolutely.
Oh, 100%. Indiana's line of scrimmages are better than Maryland's were. Oh, I don't doubt that at all. Great show so far. Subscribe to the channel. Keep up with everything on Indiana and check out Only Talk Sports. Yeah, go ahead and check out his other channel, Only Talk Sports, as well. And get over to his Indiana channel. Just prep up for the week. You think Nebraska matches up better with Indiana than they did with Illinois?
That's a good question.
I think yes, because the physicality of Illinois is what ruled the day and wore us down. And that was my concern to begin with, because there was one drive where they hit 5 third downs, and they scored a touchdown, but they were just methodical. They had the H-back, and they were using the H-back in a myriad of different ways, and then they snuck them out for a couple passes. They kind of worked everything in systematically, and they were just getting a 3rd and short and converting. But then Nebraska comes down and scores in 3 plays. And I'm not going to be upset about a touchdown, but your defense is right back on the field. And Illinois was able to wear on us. Not only that, their game plan got our defense on their heels, but Illinois was able to wear on Nebraska a bit. And wear on the run defense, because the defense, early on was stopping the run pretty well. Overall, if you look at the yards per carry, but the run game was getting some 8-10 yard carries in the second half. That's where I think, because since Nebraska is a very physical team, that's where I think Illinois was the bad matchup, or the tougher matchup, just because it's physicality on physicality. Who's going to win, and who's going to implement their game plan. With Indiana, I just think it's 2 different styles contrasting. And there's no way for me, like, it's so hard to really pinpoint how these teams match up, because they're both in like their first good season in a while. And so it's 2 completely different teams. And to be fair, our schedule hasn't been a world beater of a schedule either. So 2 teams that, have played a couple of difficult matchups. And we just don't know necessarily how they match up with each other, just because it's such a new couple of styles of these 2 teams. And that's the most interesting part. But I think the physical matchups are what I was scared of, especially with the true freshman QB, especially with the lack of depth at our O-line and our secondary. So, yeah, but that's the one thing, kind of to your point, Indiana, it's not that they can't do these things. It's just that they haven't had to yet. And that'll be the big thing as to where Indiana matches up with us, is if they can do some of the things that, are going to play into our weaknesses and maybe bring a little bit of that physicality to us, and maybe punch us in the mouth a little bit and see how we respond from there. I just feel like it's going to be explosiveness. And Nebraska's offense is explosive at times, but I think it's going to be, methodical drives versus, Indiana just kind of trying to get their chunk plays. But Curtis Rourke sets that up, because I was watching some film from Indiana, and it's all set up because he targets that middle of the field, very well, especially like the intermediate level.
Mm-hmm.
And then the linebackers it'll bring the linebackers down, and then he just throws it over the top of them in that zone coverage. So Nebraska's going to have to get very creative with their coverages too. And but I do think Illinois' game plan on film, I think that helped Nebraska's defense a ton, because they have tightened up. But this is the best offense we've faced this year. So yeah, I definitely think off rip, I would say Illinois, but we should know a lot more this Saturday. Can Indiana score a rushing TD against us? I don't know. That's tough, because Kyle Monungai got 4 shots from the 1 yard line. They ran 6 plays from the 1 yard line and couldn't get in. Rutgers.
I will say the difference, though, and not to discredit Rutgers, but like you said, Rutgers doesn't have a good passing offense, though. And see, when you have a great running back and you have to stop that guy, it puts all of the eyes on defense like, hey, we just got to shut him down. With Indiana, it's like you got to worry about the passing attack so much that it might be a little bit easier for Indiana to run on Nebraska than it was for Rutgers, because Nebraska knew that that's what Rutgers was going to do.
Specifically, I'm just talking about that goal line, Stan.
Absolutely.
Because what my game plan, what I said Nebraska needed to do going to the Rutgers game was have a multiple touchdown lead by half and carry that into the second half and kind of try to keep it within a double-digit score, because then you force Ethan Kalik-Manis to try to beat you with his arm. And everything Kirk Shiroka likes to do on Rutgers plays off of Kyle Monungai. He scripts everything off of that outside zone, inside zone, RPOs, run action passes. Like, they took that away, and Ethan Kalik-Manis had to turn into a pocket passer, and that just wasn't there. Now we're facing a pocket passer. Yeah. So the style transition there too is going to be very interesting. Now here's a question. How can Indiana O-line handle Nebraska front seven? Because in years past, that was one of Indiana's biggest issues, is their O-line play.
I agree. I mean, definitely Indiana's O-line. I mean, that's one of the biggest things. Like, I've tried to defend Tom Allen. I mean, even toward the end, I'm like, he's a good coach overall with the energy and being able to give a team hope. And he had the success with the good coordinators, especially Kalen DeBoer. I mean, now he's the Alabama head coach, even though he's getting scrutiny now, but still, he's a good coach. But then all that folded, and then lost the coordinators, and then you had a terrible offensive line coach. You had terrible offensive line play, and it gave Indiana no chance. I mean, Penix would have never transferred to Washington, but he was getting his body destroyed. Yeah. I mean, he would not be in the NFL right now, or been a Heisman candidate and all that kind of stuff, had all the success he had if he didn't get out of Indiana, because his body would have been completely.
Or get out of the Big Ten.
I mean, honestly, I'm just glad that he ended up being able to recover and have success, because we're seeing other quarterbacks like Cam Rising can't stay healthy, and his career is just going in the floor. So I'm glad Penix got out of Indiana when he did. And I'm saying that as an Indiana fan. He needed to leave. Because he was not going to survive. Indiana doesn't have that problem anymore. The O-line has a couple guys that should be draft picks. Like, I keep referencing this. Indiana has probably 5 or 6 guys that if they're not drafted, I don't know what people are doing. I really don't. Like, they should be drafted, but they're not getting any recognition. I mean, Curtis Rourke right now is, and bad teams that they've played, but Curtis Rourke right now is 10th in the Heisman voting, and he's not even on the draft boards at all. Not even in the 7th round. He's nowhere. He's not even in the 7th round on any draft board, and he's 10th in the Heisman voting. Now, obviously,
as long as he keeps winning, he'll definitely.
I mean, I know he will, but like if he was anywhere else right now, he would be on the board.
Yeah, if he was at a big school, he would. Yeah, even if he was at like Colorado.
Work in Indiana, because if he plays well against Nebraska and Indiana's offensive line plays well against Nebraska, and then these guys are going to start showing up, because that's a huge win. But I do think Indiana's O-line significantly better. I think that they're going to get to work a couple times. It's not like they're going to be able to keep them upright all game, but I do believe that Indiana's O-line is so much better, to the point where I do believe that they'll be able to hold up for the most part.
Yeah. Yeah. And to kind of piggyback off that a little bit, just kind of with Indiana and their offense. Just in your opinion, because I've kind of broke down what I saw from Indiana's offense just in watching a couple games of film, but how would you break down, the system or the systematic approach of Indiana's offense? Like, how do they create offense? For instance, like I said, with Illinois, it's just they stick to their game plan, they stick to what they do, and they build off of a formation, and they have plays that they use in situations off of that formation, and that's kind of how and then they slowly wear on you, and they try to get that run game going. What would you say is Indiana's approach and how they kind of open these guys up?
It's a great question. I mean, the thing is like I said, it's an interesting offense because of the fact that they don't do a lot of trick plays. They've done a little bit more than Tom Allen toward the end, where it was just basically running up the middle, and then on third down you had to throw it, which I'm like, what are you doing? You're going to run the ball on first and second down every time. They're going to stop it, and then you throw on third down. So I will say it's not like a very complicated offense. It's not, a lot of trick plays, different schemes, and all that kind of stuff. And it's not up tempo. Like, a lot of people assume this offense is up tempo because they're scoring a lot of points. It's not. It's really, I wouldn't say methodical, but it's just like they take most of the time on the shot clock, or the game clock rather.
They're efficient.
They're just efficient, like you said. I mean, they just run their offense. And the other thing with Tom Allen too is the fact that during his tenure, they would have like the first drive they would script it, and it was perfect, and they would score like almost every time. Like, if you remember against Michigan, remember Indiana was tied like 10-10 at the half, and then Michigan ended up beating them by like 30 a couple years ago. It's because like Indiana started out the game, they had all their plays written down, and then once they ran through that, they had nothing, and they had no other play calls. They ran through all of them. So, he did do a respectable job. That's why I keep talking about him, because he did a lot of great things for Indiana. And honestly, even though Indiana was 3-9 last year, Cignetti would not have been able to come in and have this success off the bat if Tom Allen was a really bad coach. He was not. The foundation was there. He just couldn't keep it going. So, definitely, like, Indiana's offense, very methodical. It's a mix of run and pass. I would say they pass a little bit more, but it is about 50-50. They do run the ball a decent amount, and it's not always on first down. I mean, they'll have like an 8-yard completion on first down, and then they'll run on second down, or they'll sometimes run on first down. It's just mixing it up.
And they
like
don't
you
run
said, a lot of intermediate
action.
passes, not a lot of deep throws, not even a lot of short stuff. Like, I would argue, like, throw some more like screen passes and use the blockers. No, it's a lot of just intermediate stuff. So if Nebraska could shut down the intermediate game, then I'm like, will Indiana be able to throw downfield or the short game to counter that? Because literally it's like 15 yards, just over that first line of defense. That's why Rourke should be on draft boards, because he's making passes that like 90% of quarterbacks can't make.
He's making some unbelievable throws.
Absolutely.
And it's consistency. Like, you just got to admire consistency week in and week out. I don't care who you play. People struggle against bad teams. It's the consistency is something that needs to be talked about more, for sure. And then this game, coming off of this game, of course, that's even more important because, in a way, do you feel like if Indiana loses this game, then kind of, I think this is part of the thing with a team that wasn't supposed to be good, that kind of comes in and kind of lights it up. And I say it like this. When people break down Nebraska versus Indiana, there's like this thing about it matters where people expected them to be, right? Because if people expected Nebraska to be, here, or just Nebraska is one of those teams that like has a lot of detractors and stuff. They have a lot of people who are positive, but Nebraska is built up, a lot of people who don't like them as well. But then you have Indiana, who is kind of the big story. And I feel like the Indiana team is kind of held in a higher regard in terms of just because they're outplaying expectations. They're a great story. They're a fun team to watch. Do you think that also is kind of a downside to this, where people might say, they played their first real opponent and lost, and then they kind of lose their luster and lose their steam? Is that a concern?
That is a fantastic question. I mean, the thing that's unfair about, people on social media, and it's, I guess you would say it's valid. I mean, everybody definitely has a right to an opinion, whether it's positive or negative. Absolutely. But it is unfair, though, to an extent, because I remember when Indiana played UCLA, when they went into that game, they beat their first two opponents, and they were like, okay, now they're playing their first real opponent. Indiana destroys them, right? More so than anyone else has beaten them this season. And guess what happened, Justin? People are like, oh, well, UCLA's terrible. It doesn't mean anything. And then it's like, okay, then you go into the Maryland game. Maryland's beaten Indiana the last 3 times that they've played. Maryland's made a bowl game the last 4 out of 5 years. They actually are where Indiana was at Tom Allen at one point. Like, they're better now. They are consistently like the 4th best team in the old Big Ten East that doesn't exist anymore. But they're like an average program. Indiana beats them. Oh, well, Maryland's terrible. It doesn't matter anymore. Oh, now you're going on the road again, playing Northwestern, a team that made a bowl game last year, and they're decent, and they got some good, good players. They beat them. Oh, it doesn't matter. So the thing is that I feel like the problem for Indiana is the fact that the teams that they've beaten haven't really done anything yet. Because, like, all the teams that they played, UCLA, Maryland, and Northwestern all made bowl games last year. They were all decent teams last year. If you're basing Indiana beating those teams off of those teams last year, then they'd be decent wins. But now people are looking at those teams this year. And now people are looking at Indiana, the people that are like thinking that they're really good, like, oh, wow, they've outperformed expectations. They're really good. But then they got the detractors that are like, well, they haven't played anybody. That's, like you said, a difference in opinion. To me, what really helps IU, though, and even if they lose this game, because obviously they could easily lose this game. This is a 50-50 game, despite the spread being heavily in Indiana's favor. I can't believe Indiana's favored by 6.5.
It was 3.5, and then it got bet up to 6.5.
It's at 6.5 right now. I cannot believe that Indiana's favored by 6.5 against Nebraska.
I thought 3.5 was reasonable. Home, y'all are at home, so they get the home field advantage swing there. But yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
But absolutely, like, Indiana favored by 6.5. So, like, everybody's backing him right now. But Cignetti, though, he to me is what is going to keep this team, even if they lose this 50-50 game. Like I said, doesn't matter about the spread. This is a 50-50 game. Both these teams are really, really, really solid. But Cignetti, at the beginning, when he first got hired, he was like, okay, we're going to change the way people think about Indiana. We're going to build this thing. We're going to turn this program around. This is a program that can win. He said himself, like, he came to IU because, like, they gave me the resources that I asked for. If they did not, I wasn't even going to do it. Like, he said, I wasn't even going to bother with this team. But, like, they're committed to football now. Like, they are, I believe, actually committed to football, which is why I have a hard time seeing him leaving the school. Even if he does end up leaving, that would really hurt. But I think Indiana's more committed to football. But he was like, even before anybody committed, he's like, we're going to compete in this conference. We're going to have success, and we're not going to get too high or too low. Yeah. He's never changed his attitude at all from when he got hired. Like, they're 6-0 right now, and he's like, I'm not saying that, like, oh, I knew for sure we were going to be 6-0, but, like, I knew, like, if we played hard, like, this is what we could do. You know, and I'm not getting too high. Like, I'm not like Tom Allen where I'm running around the field when we beat anybody. I mean, like, I love Tom Allen to death. The guy was so awesome. But, I mean, when they beat anybody, when they beat Akron in 4 overtimes a year ago, he was cheering and running all over the field like they won the Super Bowl or the national championship. Kurt Cignetti's like, oh, well, we beat Western Illinois 77-3. We broke the school record for points and yards. We got the win. It's all that mattered. On to the next one. He just has a bare bones, doesn't care attitude of, like, doesn't matter how much we win. Doesn't matter if we lose. We get back to the drawing board, do our thing. He's already, like, told his team, like, several times during the bye week and this week, like, doesn't matter. This is big noon kickoff. It doesn't matter that we're favored. It doesn't matter. Like, all this stuff doesn't matter. We have to have the same approach that we've had in all these other games, because if we do, we will win this game. But if you let it get to your head, if you let the spotlight get to your head, people are actually paying attention to you now. You're going to slip up and lose. So I just feel like Cignetti's approach and what he tells his players will be a big thing that even if Nebraska loses, or not Nebraska, but even if Indiana loses Nebraska, like, it's not going to, like, oh, now against Washington, it's all over. The shine is over. We're done. Like, we're going to get back to the drawing board, keep it going. And even if they beat Nebraska, oh, now we don't let it get to our head and all that kind of stuff. Like, oh, we're going to go make the playoffs and everything. Like, at a time, in my opinion.
Yeah. Interesting question. We kind of alluded to a little bit about pressure earlier, but do you think Indiana will bring a bunch of blitzes, like he says, knowing Dylan can create outside the pocket?
That's a great question, Austin. Absolutely. I mean, the thing is, I would try to blitz some in the game. I wouldn't do it a lot. I would try to blitz a little bit. And if like you can consistently get pressure and rattle Raiola, then I do think that you can keep doing it. But like if he's having success, you know, like he's getting blitz, but then he's throwing it downfield, or he's getting completions, or even if he uses his legs, which he doesn't do much, but he's capable of, then I think I would back off the blitz. Because that's something like when Indiana had Kane Womack at defensive coordinator a few years ago, who's now at Alabama. He just blitzed like almost every single play. Yeah. And when they played Ohio State and Justin Fields back in 2020, and they almost beat him with Penix threw for 500 yards, he just kept blitzing Fields, and it worked. But then in other games that he would blitz all the time, it didn't work. So I think you have to mix it up. I would blitz at times, but I would not over blitz.
Yeah,
I definitely wouldn't play soft defense either. Just let Nebraska dink and dunk. I wouldn't do that. I mean, I would pressure and definitely. I mean, he's a freshman. I mean, he's gonna maybe make a mistake in this game, and especially if Indiana's defense plays well. But I wouldn't do it too much because you don't want, especially if Indiana's not consistently getting to him getting into a rhythm like, oh, I can handle their blitz. I'm not bothered by it. So definitely depends on how the game's going and how much I would use it and whether they're having success with it.
For sure. And Jim Philippi kind of echoes your point. Don't be over aggressive, don't over blitz. So that way you don't end up, giving up chunk plays. Because if Indiana starts giving up chunk plays, then that becomes a big issue. If Nebraska's offense gets in a rhythm. Nebraska play different defenses like they did against Rutgers. Don't play 3-5. Appreciate you, BA. Appreciate you jumping in here late, and love you too. Who's your daddy? What's up, Clint? Appreciate you hopping in here. If Indiana blitzes Dylan Satterfield to make him pay. Oh, yeah, I already did that one. Last year's results do not equal current strength. Yeah, well, Florida State's an.
I picked them to go 8-4 in the preseason too.
I
thought I might have been too low.
Bro, I don't think nobody could have predicted what's happening over there.
Oh, and it was funny, Justin. I love when people say, "Oh, I knew they were going to be horrible this year." No, you didn't. Everybody picked them to at least make a bowl game.
Yeah, if the people that thought they were going to be horrible are just people who hate on them that actually didn't think they were going to be horrible. They just said that this offseason. Probably Florida fans and other stuff.
Like they they don't have like a tweet or something or some evidence saying that, oh, I had them going 2-10 in my preseason prediction. Like, no,
so
he did not.
It's hilarious, dude. Hilarious. Good comparison, Corey. Moose, appreciate it. Going over to the Michigan Live channel. They are live now. I think they will mix it up. Definitely. I think Indiana is going to go out there, and I think it's just going to be a kind of a trial and error. And one of the things that, is going to be the big factor in this game is halftime adjustments. Who adjusts better at half? And I think that's going to tell the story for sure. Well, the stream ends. Remember, Nebraska is greater than Alabama. I will say when we were watching Rutgers, Nebraska live on the Big Ten show, he said Nebraska's better than Alabama, and then Alabama ended up losing to Vanderbilt that day. So it actually aged pretty well.
Yeah, it did. I mean, I don't know. If I go as far.
No, I'm not saying
I mean,
that.
Alabama's significantly worse. Don't get me wrong.
But it was just the timing of it. But we're definitely nowhere near that.
That is hilarious.
Nowhere near that. But it was just the timing of it was impeccable. We all thought Florida State was going to exactly. FSU was getting what they deserve for complaining about not making playoff and losing by 60 to Georgia. Florida State's in. They
should have made the playoff. I mean, if Jordan Travis didn't get hurt, they should have made the playoff. I mean,
Florida State's in shambles. Nobody wants them, and they're because they're hard to work with. I mean, they're in lawsuits with the ACC, and they're in a tough spot. And Florida State's really struggling. Underrated point. Special teams could win the day. Yeah, I didn't want to talk about special teams actually. Unfortunately, it's a negative topic. Our special teams
for Indiana, I will say
horrible.
It's a positive thing.
Yeah, so ours is horrible. I'm trying to make my score predictions without Nebraska getting a field goal because I don't know if we can kick a field goal. So that's another factor.
Nebraska's kicking game was that bad. I did not know that.
It's bad. It's bad. I can 1 for 4 against Purdue. Let me see if I can find the overall, because we had Tristan Alvano earlier in the season, and Tristan Alvano struggled last year. So this year, he came out and let's see, he was 3 for 4, but then we had John Hull, who, like I said, he missed 3 out of his 4, but a couple of them are holds, so it's the operation too. But he's 20%, 1 for 5. So it's a bit of a struggle there. And so that's going to have to be really kind of, I don't know, because they've had opportunities to fix it this entire season and they haven't been able to. However, Matt Rule did say, I forget who he said, but somebody gave him, somebody he trusts gave him like a list of things that they need to focus on to improve the special teams. So hopefully that'll help them get it together a little bit. Because if that's too big of a disparity, that can make all the difference. And we did have that fake punt last week. Bushini came out with that fake punt. I will say our punting game, very good. It's just the field goal kicking game. It's not, leaves a lot to be desired for sure.
Yeah, for Nebraska, Indiana, I mean, they've been really good on with the special teams. Like the field goal kicker, Nicholas Radicic. I mean, they say Indiana can't get a 5-star, right? They cannot get a 5-star player. Well, they got a 5-star kicker. He was the top-rated kicker in the kicking rankings. They have a separate ranking for kickers.
They do, yeah.
So, like, he was the top one. So I was like, Indiana got a 5-star. People are like, no, they didn't. I'm like, yes, they did. They got a kicker. So he's good. And their punter, James Evans from Australia, I mean, he's one of the best in college football. He's barely had to punt, though. But he's been there for 5 years now, and he might be an NFL punter. We'll see. It's such a tough thing to crack because there's not that many teams that need punters, but he's really good. So the only thing I'm a little worried about is that Indiana's starting to kick off guys, the kickoff guy down the field after you score a touchdown or field goal. Both of them are hurt. So they're on their third-string kickoff guy, but he's good. He's good too. But I can't believe they're starting to both hurt their hamstrings. That is just bizarre. So thankfully, hopefully nothing happens to the third guy because then our field goal kicker's going to have to do it. But besides that, everything's good with that.
Cool. Hopefully your holder gets sick or something. Laces in every time. Sean says, congrats on your team's great turnaround. And Joe Schmo, over under on Harburg. Oh, Harburg. I said Harbaugh first. I was like, Harbaugh, why is he there? Harburg side. Did notice IU can be susceptible to QB scramble. One of the things that, I kind of broke down what I think would be a great role for Heinrich Harburg, and that was, I think he could be utilized excellently as an H-back. Again, an H-back is kind of a hybrid fullback tight end. It's more usually athletic than those tight ends.
Kind of like Taysom Hill in a weird way.
Yeah, where he can't throw, really around 50% is about where you're going to find him. Inconsistent, but I think put him in an H-back role. Fedoni plays that H-back role as well. Carter Nelson does sometimes, and it doesn't have to be just bring him in for a series of plays that you have planned out with him. It doesn't have to be the whole game because he is our backup quarterback at the end of the day. But I think there's also times where he can be utilized for maybe a QB draw, something like that. But I just think we've been getting a little too cute with him at times. And so I think they just need to have a better systematic approach to using him because it seems random right now. And they had him in the backfield against when they were leading up to practice versus, I believe it was Illinois. I was told that they were working with him in the backfield. So I'm curious to see if we see any of that. But it'll be interesting to see if they got any packages for him, especially coming off of the bye week.
I will say in response to that comment about IU being susceptible to the scramble, though, quarterback scramble, the weird thing about it is that Billy Edwards is a quarterback well known for his running ability because he came in for Tua's younger brother 2 years ago. Indiana was winning the game.
Northwesterns can run pretty good too.
He got hurt, and then Billy Edwards came in and ran all over IU. Billy Edwards didn't run over Indiana at all in the game this year. But then, like you said, Northwestern's quarterback, Jack Loesch, he did good against Indiana. And I wasn't expecting him to do as well. I knew he could run, but I thought, like, between those two teams, I was like, if I had to guess who was going to be better, I would have thought it was Billy Edwards. But no, it was Northwestern's quarterback. So I'm like, that's kind of something to hold a little bit on. I don't think Indiana's necessarily susceptible to the run. I think they were more surprised that Northwestern's quarterback was as good as he was running the ball versus Billy Edwards. They probably scouted that better because they shut him down, didn't let him do anything. So definitely Indiana doesn't need to become susceptible to quarterback scramble, but really only the Northwestern games they've had any issue with on that.
Yeah. And Raiola, why he's not a runner, he can run, but Lausch is a little bit more athletic than Raiola overall. That was about the FSU stuff. So you're telling me if Nebraska needs a field goal? Yes, that's exactly what I'm telling you. I'm telling you, if we need a field goal to win, we're going to lose. Indiana's a national power in soccer. Nebraska's got volleyball. Harbury needs to stay on the sideline in case we need him. As if he comes out on the field, like I said, it needs to be sparingly so he doesn't get hurt, because after him, we got it's rough. Danny Kalin, who we're trying to maintain his red shirt, and then we have Jalen Gramstead, who came from NAIA, the league NAIA, right before the season started. So I don't even know if he's ready to rock and roll. One thing that worries me about Nebraska is if they get a big lead, will their offense take their foot off of the gas? That has been a problem this season. A little bit too conservative, and I'm hoping maybe they've learned from that, especially against an Indiana team that can score quickly. They're not going to be able to. So I just think that no matter what, they got to keep running that same offense. They can't. And I think our offense needs to be a little bit, conservative to begin with, just like in terms of, I don't mean conservative in terms of just like not trying to score. I mean conservative in terms of sticking to, running the ball, set up the pass, be methodical. But that is a concern. That's definitely a concern that Nebraska has had this season. Again, putting together a full.
I mean, definitely. That's why, like you said earlier, you referenced the fact that they beat Rutgers by 7 because they could have maybe won by more, but just didn't. And then Wisconsin blew out Rutgers. So you can see you can blow out a team if you just keep playing hard. I mean, look at Tennessee, that Oklahoma game where they were beating them by a lot, and then they just took their foot off the gas. If you just continue to play hard and do what you were doing, you're going to end up winning by a ton sometimes. So definitely, I mean, if Nebraska or Indiana, for that matter, gets ahead by 10 or 14 points, keep playing what got you the lead, because then you can win by even more. And I'm not as concerned with Indiana with that, because they have never taken their foot off the gas once this season. So I'm not worried about that. But definitely, if you're Nebraska and you get a lead, do not take your foot off the gas. Absolutely. For sure.
Before we move into predictions, just real quick, do you have anything else that you wanted to touch on?
That's a great question. I would say, do you think, I mean, I wouldn't say it's a bad question, but do you think Matt Rule is a better coach than Cignetti, or do you think they're comparable? It's still kind of early with Cignetti. I get that. But what are your thoughts on the coaching matchup, or as the whole with the coaching staffs?
I think Matt Rule is better only because he's done it with a Power 5 program in Baylor. And with what Baylor was up against with the death penalty and all that, and him being able to do that and doing it at Temple, and what he's done so far at Nebraska. But again, that is just, he's had more places to prove it at a higher level. It's not saying Cignetti isn't or can't be. I just think right now you have to put Matt Rule ahead of him.
I would agree 100%.
Yeah. So I think Nebraska's D-line is going to have a feast this weekend. Possible. It's possible. That's what we need, though. We need those guys to eat up front so we can keep those linebackers in the middle of the field. That's the problem. We can't keep our linebackers in the middle of the field, because that's what y'all like to target. So let's go ahead and I guess we'll go ahead and, do you have a prediction in mind first off?
I do have a prediction. I had to go back and forth. I will say that I've been going back and forth on these two teams, because I think it's a coin flip. I do not agree with the 6.5 point spread. I mean, it's cool seeing Indiana favored by that much, but I think it's 50-50. So I got a score prediction, but it took me a while to finally make my prediction.
What is it?
Well, I would say that looking at both teams, it's even. And I think that the strengths and weaknesses of both teams are, even though they're different weaknesses and strengths, they average out to both teams being around the same. Even though Nebraska has the one loss and they're not ranked, and Indiana's ranked 16th, that doesn't mean Indiana's better. As Mark Rogers himself has said all the time, there's not much difference between teams ranked anywhere from 15 to 35 or 40. It's just all how the records and the schedules balance themselves out. So definitely, both these teams are about even. I would argue actually that Nebraska as a team is a little bit better than Indiana. They probably have, more guys that are going to be in the NFL. Yeah, I've been hyping up IU's guys that should be in the NFL for this season, but Nebraska's got more studs. The only difference is that Indiana has the experienced players in the portal, the Mikel Camaras, the Curtis Rourkes. These guys have been around forever, 5, 6, 7 years in college football. Indiana, out of the 32 seventh-year players in college football this year, Indiana has 4 of them. Indiana has 4 of those 32 seventh-year players. Nebraska, they got some guys that have experience too, but then they got the freshmen. They got Rayola. He's young, going on the road. I'm worried about Indiana in this game because it's the big noon game. They're undefeated. Everybody is hyping them up, hyping up the Hoosiers. It could be the game that finally cracks them, but I'm going to go with Indiana to beat Nebraska 28-24. I made that prediction before you said Nebraska couldn't kick a field goal. So
I have the same exact prediction, just the other way.
Okay.
I almost did 28-27, but 28-24. I have the same thing, just the other way. Yeah, no field goals. and
I feel bad that I gave Nebraska a field goal now. I shouldn't have done it. I didn't know.
Hey, listen, it's our good. We'll take it. We'll take it. Well, I mean, we at least made one versus Purdue, so there's a shot. There's a chance. Did Matt Roll win the Big 12 with Baylor? I don't even know if they were eligible to win the Big 12 during that, because they were in such a bind with that death penalty. I don't even know. I know they weren't able to make a bowl game or anything like that. Nebraska 20-16. I like it. It'd be nice to hold Indiana 16. That's for dang sure.
Yeah, I'm about to say, they do hold Indiana to 16. That is a great
good day.
Job.
It's a good
day.
They
probably will win.
Yeah, 100%. If we hold them 16, but yeah, that's going to be tough. 31-27 Indiana. That's reasonable. They lost in the Big 12. Okay, so I guess they were allowed, able to be in it. That's right, because that was their second loss.
Oklahoma State or something.
Yeah, I think that was their second loss, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. 35-21 IAU. Can't watch it, and I'm a Nebraska fan. Have obligations Saturday. Well,
I never think Indiana will win by 14. You would have to be the first, Corey, because no one online saying that.
Yeah, it's tough. And I even got flack from Nebraska fans in my comment, though, that like if you ask a question about a team, like ask a question about the physicality, then they're like, "Oh, you're underestimating." I'm like, I'm not underestimating them at all. I'm asking a question, But so I think there might be a couple people, but I like the honesty and I like the fairness of the people who do that. So now I want to say I appreciate everybody who hopped in here with us. Thank you all so much. Oh, let me get now Ron, I already gave my score prediction. I was like, I forgot. I told you, it's flip-flopped. But yeah, appreciate everybody hopping in here with us. Again, Jeffrey, you want to tell the people where they can find you one more time?
Appreciate it, Justin. Definitely. It was absolutely a fun show. Enjoyed it a lot. And I hope it's going to be a fantastic game, whoever wins. But for sure, you can find me on the Voice of College Football on the Indiana channel, Indiana at the Voice of College Football. Right now, we are at 50 subscribers, trying to build up the channel. There's a lot of Indiana fans that are so excited about the Hoosiers, and definitely want to go check out Indiana at the Voice of College Football. Would really appreciate it. And you could also find me on my YouTube channel, Only Talk Sports, where I talk about basketball, football, NFL, NBA, all that kind of stuff. So definitely would appreciate if you guys check me out over there. But was a blast to come on and do this crossover episode. It was just perfect. That definitely, hopefully do this again eventually. That'd be great, between Nebraska and Indiana.
That'd be awesome. Absolutely, man. And happy to have you on the Voice of College Football team. And again, everybody who showed up and supported and watched the stream, liked the stream, commented, thank y'all so much. Much appreciated. Of course, you can find me, if you're not on the Nebraska Voice of College Football channel right now, over there, and at the Big Ten Show on YouTube as well, at _H-Town Husker on X, if you want to find me there. I just got out of Twitter jail a few hours ago, so I'm back. I'm back on there. So, but yeah, thanks everybody again. Jeffrey, thank you so much for coming on. I enjoyed it as well. And with that being said, we'll see you in the next video. Peace.